have been working with Laurent Mignonneau now the last 32 years. And as Ingeborg already mentioned, we created many artworks. And in about 2019, we were approached by Karin Ohlenschläger, a well-known curator who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, to reconstruct several of our artworks for our big retrospective exhibition. And the artworks title that are highlighted here in red, and you see that some of them are already quite at the beginning of interactive art in the early 90s. We were able to reconstruct them for the retrospective exhibition. And Karin's focus was to choose works that are dealing mostly about artificial life, about life like metaphors, and also our interactive works, which is a specialty in the art production of Laurent and myself. We often use algorithms, so there's a lot of mathematics actually also behind. Since my background is biology and botany especially, we often have also motifs from nature, such as plants, or also evolution. So often botanical and also biological topics are coming very strongly into our art focus. Then here's some exhibition information from the EMAL exhibition, from the ZKM exhibition, and from the Azkuna Centroa in Bilbao, where this retrospective has now been traveling for the last 3 years. And we are actually right now looking for eventually bringing it to Asia as well, because we lived there for many years. I will now go a little bit back into this idea of what is the system of artwork as a living system. What do we mean by this? By showing you concrete examples, and also highlight a little bit the background on motivation and topics that we are dealing with. This is the outside of the Azkuna Centroa in Bilbao. We often, in the area of human-computer interaction, combined in interactive art. And as you will see, we often also develop these interfaces by ourselves, and not only use off-the-shelf technology, but really also, I think you, Wolfgang, mentioned it, tinkering, I think, is one of the things that we are doing, really opening the black boxes, making things by ourselves, and also inventing innovative interaction experiences, and often provide systems where people can interact with artificial life algorithms, but also physical interaction. So often there's also a physical component in our works. I should look a little bit at the time, yes. First artwork that we did in '92, where we were still students of Peter Weibel in Frankfurt, was interactive plant growing. Here we created an installation. My background is also installation art, so it's often also an installation in the space that is important for us. Here we put real plants on pedestals, and when people touch these real plants, they see artificial plants growing behind on a projection screen. And the way people touch this plant is actually influencing the way the artificial plants grow on the screen. We do this by measuring or picking up the electrical potential of the real plant, and then transforming this data and translating this data into growing algorithm parameters that determine how the artificial plants develop on the screen. Here's just a sort of short explanation. We measure the distance between hand and plant, and this voltage differences determines how the artificial plants then, how big they become, what kind of colors they get, what kind of rotation they have, where they grow, and eventually when people interact with the real plants in the space, by touching them randomly, or you never know what people are actually going to do, you get quite a complex virtual garden that's always different depending on what people are doing in the physical space. And this is something I think also Wolfgang mentioned before. Also, it's very dark. Wolfgang mentioned before, this is also a bit between order and chaos. And this is exactly what we like, because we find that this idea of life-like systems are often something that you can control and not control. And this is what we really want to do in artworks, that through the interaction, you conduct the algorithms, you influence the algorithms, but the algorithms are also, with parameters themselves, creating life-like systems. Another installation that we did a couple of years later, at that time we already lived in Japan, is called Eau de Jardin. Here we hang plants, real plants, from the ceiling in front of a very large projection screen. And when people come and approach these plants or touch them, they also grow those artificial plants on the screen. This time it's more like a top view. And you see here Laurent in the OK Center, or here another image. I hope you can see something, this becomes very light here, that these plants are really used as interfaces to interact with the visitors. Oh, where's my cursor? Sorry. Oh, okay. And you influence these living systems, or what we call living systems. Another topic that we got very much into is artificial life, especially in the 90s. We started to explore generative algorithms, genetic algorithms and genetic programming, which is basically imitating principles from nature, such as evolutionary principles, and trying to extract these principles into computer programming. It's again mathematics, and look for systems that can emerge and show novel features and have results that are not predetermined by us as artists or pre-designed, but the artwork in a way, and all what I say is quite metaphorical, but the artwork evolves through the interaction with the visitors and the system itself. Here you see a work from '94. It's a pool filled with water. There's real water inside. And people can see kind of jellyfish-like forms, but they are quite abstract. And they can touch the forms also in the water. They can interact with them, they can protect them, they can play with them, and also they can create them. So here we see from the Van Gogh Museum, when it was quite in the 2000s, where we showed it. And you have to really try this system, because it's quite fascinating to create these creatures by yourself and then see them evolve. They have a genetic code which is coming from their design. So actually your drawing is a genetic code which then determines how the creature moves around in the pool, how fit it is, and also what it is going to do. And this is a system setup. People can, as I said, as I mentioned, touch the creatures. They can play with them. But the creatures have also, I don't go into details now, but the creatures have a complex behavior pattern that is always checking how fit they are, how fast they are, how much energy they have. And you get the predator-prey behavior. And also eventually through the mixture of two parent creatures, a child creature inherits the genetic code of the parents, and a small kind of mini evolution takes place where you have some form of emergent behaviors. I show you here sorry, I don't know where my cursor, what happened to me? It's here, okay, sorry. We see here a short clip. This is the touch panel where people draw any shape as they like. And then this shape that they have been drawing becomes alive, under apostrophe, and moves around, swims around in the pool very fast. And once it's in the pool, it wants to eat. And eating means killing other creatures, sucking up the energy of the other creatures. And if this succeeds, then the creature has enough energy to mate with another creature. So it has to find another creature, and if that succeeds, they merge together and make a child, and the child looks similar to the parents, but with some genetic mixture and genetic mutation. So we also use, like in nature, mutation as a way to introduce novel features and emergent behaviors. Here just a short shot from the reconstruction that we did for the ZKM, and it's actually, this work is now part of the ZKM collection, and we are quite happy that we could reconstruct this piece from 94. Or here one more shot where you see me playing with the creatures. If I put my hand onto them, then they forget what they wanted to do. They sort of become a bit numb. But if you protect them too long, they also use up their lifetime and they die quickly. So users or participants really have also this sort of responsibility to play and interact and also help the creatures to evolve further. This whole idea of evolution is something that we also exercised in other pieces. Here, for example, a piece from 94, phototropy. Here visitors get a flashlight. I think you see her having a flashlight in the hand. And they can feed artificial insects, a bit like moths or butterflies or different sort of little bees. And if they feed the insects with light, these insects reproduce, they make children. They again inherit the genetic code to the next generation. So you always have some form of evolutionary structure where you never know exactly how the next generation, maybe they are becoming faster and reach the light quicker. But there's always this very playful aspect as well, where the visitors give light to the insects and help them to reproduce. But if they give too much light to the insects, they also kill the insects. So again, this idea, this delicate balance between you as a visitor playing or feeding the artificial life, but also you can also eliminate the artificial life. So we always like this idea of very delicate balance between giving life and taking away life. I think now it's becoming very light here. I hope you still see something. This is a typewriter that became very popular, has also been shown a lot. Maybe here we're talking about media archaeology. When we moved back from Japan, which is a very high-tech country, when we moved back to Austria, we were fascinated by finding a lot of old machines on the flea market, like old radios, old typewriters, basically media archaeological devices. And so we came to this idea of readapting an old typewriter and turn it somehow into a computer by connecting every key of the typewriter to an interface that Laurent constructed. It's hidden inside the machine. And when you type actually physically on the typewriter, you can create real text that is projected on a piece of paper. It's also a real paper, but the paper also moves around with the paper tray, and it has a projection on top. And what happens is you type text, and then the text turns into letters on the screen. But then as soon as you turn the handle of the real typewriter, this text transforms into little spiders that look very abstract, a bit like very simple creatures. So your text actually transforms into animals, artificial animals, that are encoded directly from the ASCII code of the text that you type into the genetic code of the creatures. And what happens is actually quite fascinating. You type your text, it transforms into little spiders. They move around hectically on the piece of paper. I think we have a short sequence here. And at the beginning, you don't really know what's going on, but once you start typing and experimenting, you see that there is actually a logic to it. Because if you write AAA and turn it into a creature, it always looks the same. But if you write something else, the creature looks different. So there is a logic to it, but there is also this idea of randomness, because you don't know exactly when the two creatures or two spiders meet. They make a child, and then the child moves around on the piece of paper as well. And it's definitely a lot of fun and has been extremely popular wherever we show this piece. Then how I'm doing with the time? Let's go a bit faster. This is a work. I have time, yes. This is a work that's technically more simple, but also was quite popular. It's called Portrait on the Fly. It's, this time we didn't really invent any technology. We just used the standard screen with a webcam. But Laurent wrote a very clever software where he has about 10,000 flies that are moving around randomly on the screen. But as soon as someone puts him or herself in front of the screen, the silhouette of the person is being detected by the software. And then the flies, they have a very simple rule. They just want to sit wherever they detect an outline. And by this simple rule, you get quite complex behavior. I show you maybe on the video, it's easiest. And the portrait of the person who experiments this is being displayed or recomposed by the flies, but the flies also move around very hectically and go away quickly. So the portrait that you see is always in constant flux and in motion, in movement, and you only see it in this very instant when you keep still for a short moment. And this has also been very popular. We showed it a lot. And I guess also one of the reasons is people really like to see themselves. I think everyone has this sort of selfie culture. But then again, also this idea of a fly that is kind of not so nice, but also fascinating. And I think most people, when you talk to them, they say, oh, I don't like flies. But in this installation, we heard that this idea of the fly is something that sort of triggers quite a lot of maybe deeper emotion about memento mori, life and death. So I think there's a lot of like hidden meaning in the symbol of the fly. Then let's move ahead a bit. Then we had more flies, this time also in more public spaces, and we come from flies to ants quickly. This was in a large media space in Azcuna Centro in Bilbao. We had the good luck to have a very large screen. And people, when they entered the building, they saw themselves in kind of black and white as an image. But they were also being attacked by real computer-generated flies. And eventually they could play and see themselves being followed by huge swarms of flies, which is maybe a bit unpleasant, but at the same time also fun to play with. So here the idea was to also let people experiment and experience interactive art in a very intuitive and very fast and very easy to access way. The same can also be shown inside. This was a shot from the OK Center in Linz, where we had it on a larger LED screens. Actually, here's Susanne Pech. She came to the opening of the retrospective in Linz. Here maybe one more shot, just to show you how you are being followed by a big swarm of flies, which again had this a bit creepy effect at the beginning, but can also be quite fascinating to experiment and run and improvise with your body. And the last piece I want to show you is ANTopolis, where we see a short animation here. We were lucky in 2021, this was 2 weeks between the two lockdowns in Austria. We were lucky to make a very large public display in the MuseumsQuartier in Vienna and projected on the Leopold Museum. And also had an interactive station where you could place yourself in front of a camera and then see your face being composed of ants, so not flies this time, but ants. And I want to show you, let me see, just here a few images. So maybe we don't need the sound. This is actually Benesta Dika, who was the curator, and I think she knows you well. And what was a very interesting experience for us is if you do these kind of things in public space, you have to deal with a very different attention span because, you know, people are not expecting to see art in public space. So if you want to grab their attention, you have to provide some very kind of fast feedback or make it in a scale so that people understand that they can participate here and, eventually also come up to the interactive station and, like you see here, make their own portraits and then project them on the screen. And it was quite beautiful to see also these ants, similar like the ones that we see in the gallery, in the Quartier gallery, crawling around on the facade and basically taking over the whole building. And yesterday Wolfgang asked me, why are you so fascinated with ants or animals? I think it's also, we talked about this a little bit, it's even though they are relatively simple organisms, same like with flies, they do in a collective or in a group have a very complex behavior. So we really like this idea of taking principles from nature, such as maybe swarming behavior or evolution or genetic inheritance, and try to reconstruct it on the computer, of course in a more simplistic and in a more reduced way, but to show this fascination for nature and transport it into an interactive experience. That would be it from my side. This is the book that you mentioned, the MIT Press book. We were very happy and lucky that Peter Weibel for the retrospective really also insisted that we make a good book about it and put all our artworks inside. And we were lucky to publish this with MIT Press 2022. And yeah, here are some more books that we've been doing, Art and Science of Interface and Interaction Design in 2009, I believe. And another book about interface culture, which is the study program that we are running in Linz in Austria. And here an old book from 1998, which was about art and science and bringing together different people like Erkki Hutamo, also Peter Weibel, of course, was there, Wolfgang Strauss, Monika Fleischmann. So this idea of bringing art and science topics together through interactive experiences is something that we still continue to be fascinated about. That would be it from my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you so much that you came to
Thank
us
you so much.
and that we had a chance to have this incredible work of your whole life achievement. So I will ask you, before I ask somebody else, I'm fascinated with technical also achievement of both of you, not only aesthetical. So how you and Laurent did all the technical things? Was there long research? You needed a long time, or is it like experimenting, or how did you do it?
That's a very good question. I have to admit that all the programs are written by Laurent, and also the interfaces are made by Laurent. But when it comes to the conceptual and also, interactive part of deciding how it's presented, how the maybe structure of the interaction is in terms of timing, how to bring it to people, this is something that we do, of course, together. And that's also where my more like sculptural background comes in. So there's a lot of discussion, a lot of development. But Laurent is actually a very genius engineer also, and has been doing this since his early childhood. He learned programming and electronics by himself. So there's like really a very deep understanding of technology on his part.
My observation on couples who do longer term projects is exactly that you need at least two people, two knowledges or two different, and during this together work you bring this new. And I always said, students, don't think you have to do everything alone.
Yes.
Work with others, work with us, and that would be developed in modern time. It's not anymore painter. Even painters had in 15th century who others were doing for them. So don't think you have to do all alone, although when you do, as you probably, it's also very great. But I'm really admiring your work. So anyway, not to talk, I would ask anybody have comment? Yes, I was sure. Yes, please. Would you like to
well, thank you for this impressive and important. And this is a genuine, I mean, it's 30 years or even more of genuine, what we call media art, which is different from traditional art. Now, one thing is, I somehow regret that yesterday when I was visitor at the Quartier opening of the exhibition, I could not experience the interactive version. I don't know if was this a practical reason because it was too complicated to install. Financial. Okay, because once it's only recorded, all the interactive element gets lost, of course. Okay, but this may be the practical explanation. But the more I'm happy that we learned about it, the interactive. Now, concerning, again, I put myself into the position of the visitor, of the user. Is it necessary, I mean, with all of my admiration, which I could extend but take it for granted, but critical, the user is reduced to an intuitive ant itself. People, a lot of so-called interactive media arts since the 1990s, users are exactly what we could see in the Japan exhibition. They intuitively play with something, they smile, they are happy, they make gestures. Humans are subcritically reduced to feedback mechanisms as if they were ants themselves. So,
of course,
I find this, all the cleverness, what Laurent programs, is behind the diagrams, the models, which you even showed. I mean, you have all this knowledge about genetic algorithms and evolutionary biology, and how this can be programmed or simulated or emulated. And the user is not aware. His ratio, his analytical mind, his or her critical awareness does not take place. So this was always, and the user does not even know, is this artwork, this artificial plant really reacting to what I do, or has it been pre-programmed by you, to what degree? So isn't the user in a way reduced to something less than human? And now that brings me back to Ingeborg's very interesting remark on your work. Isn't there a way to step beyond the separation of conceptual artists on the one hand and computational scientists who programs it on the other hand? Most media art works like that. There are only few artists who do it all themselves. Maybe then again it's one person. But is it that aesthetics and knowledge, technical knowledge, in a way still exclude each other? They can work together, but I'm looking for a more entangled way of having it both. Both on the side of the artistic production and for the user, to make this experience as well, to have an intuitive impression, an aesthetic impression, but at the same time a critical mind, which is challenged. And it's not challenged if the user just plays and smiles when the face turns.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it this way. I understand your point, and of course you can show all the algorithms. You can do live coding. I think especially probably some of you also followed this movement, which sort of died out at one point. But there was this movement of live coding where people, mostly guys, sitting in front of the screen, the audience there, somebody coding live. You see a lot of code. But this was so boring, you know. The audience was not interested. This was maybe a short moment in time when live coding was kind of in. But, I mean, the audience, you have to think, audience is not dumb, and it's not reduced to something, but capturing the attention of someone in an exhibition is not as easy as you might think. And sometimes it's easier or better to catch the attention of your audience, and then later through the physical, through the embodied experience, and maybe I didn't talk enough about this, but we're really big fans of embodied experience, that by experiencing something, by touching something, by being somewhere, by being surrounded by something, by seeing the physicality of the objects or the experience, you get a knowledge that is not only verbalized, but it's a bit like a child, a knowledge that goes in your body and that you remember and that makes you think about what have I experienced now. It might have been very fun only, but eventually you start to think like, what did this mean? Why was there the fish in the water? Why did they change? Why did they evolve? What does it mean? And eventually you maybe start to, and we had a lot of experience and also discussion with people, eventually they might think about, evolution is fascinating. I didn't even know so much that, the genetic code, of course we know that we are all the product of the genetic exchanges between the parents' generation before us, we know that. But to see it in a mini evolution that you experience right on the fly in the pool by doing it yourself is something different than to just intellectualizing it and say like, I've been reduced to just a user. So I would not be so radical in saying that this is a too reduced version. Maybe intellectuals like you would prefer to have a lot of text written next to it and everything is explained and the algorithms and the formulas and the whole program is also printed out. We could do that, and partly we did it, but honestly nobody is reading this. In an exhibition, people are not interested. I mean, most people don't even read the sign on the wall. So as an artist, you have to find other ways to get people, and I think we've seen it also well with your artwork. You have to use other methods to get people into your story that you want to tell them. And yeah, maybe it's too simple for some people, I agree. But from the feedback that we get and from what people tell us, they still get a lot of things out of it, because we should not forget the power of metaphors, or the power of, images and feelings that are triggered by seeing something. For example, we were by ourselves super surprised that the fly piece was so popular, because it's a very simple program, and Laurent said he wrote it in one day. But then this idea of a fly sitting on your outline apparently triggers something deep in many people that reminds them maybe to something unpleasant, and we don't want flies, we want to get rid of them. And so there's a lot of things, symbols. I think as an artist you work with symbols also. Symbols, feelings, and metaphors. And you sometimes don't need the most complicated technology to trigger those things. It was very difficult. First of all, the computers already, very difficult to access computers in the first place. We were lucky that we were at Peter Weibel's Institute of New Media. They had some very high-end graphic computers, Silicon graphics computers, but nobody had a computer by ourselves. We all didn't have a computer ourselves. We could also access these computers only 1 hour a day maximum, so you had to think a lot before you actually do something to program it, and to write the program by hand first, and then try it quickly in this 1 hour a day. And, luckily it worked, but it was very difficult. And also for the setup, first of all, the technology was still very hard to access. And also, of course, to get the technology for an exhibition was very difficult. On the other hand, I have to say there was also a very big wow effect back then. I mean, now many people do media art. But back then, this was a very small community of people. It was a very small scene, basically. So in that sense, catching attention and, being making an impact, it was easier in a way, because it was very new back then also. Mm-hmm.
In Japan, was it more available with technology there? They had scene of this new media technology.
Yeah, I would say that...
The question is about Japan.
In Japan, yes, the question is about the media scene in Japan. When we moved there in 94, 95, there was, the early media art scene was very international already. So we moved around a lot, we exhibited in America, we exhibited in Finland, in Monaco, in lots of places. So it was already very international, but very small. And what maybe the big difference was compared to, say, in Europe, where media art was always being regarded as not real art. We often heard, what you do is nice, but it's not art. many people, mostly from the art critics and art people from museums, told us right away, this is not art. Be sure this is not art. It's cool, but it's not art. And in Japan, this question never appeared. They always said, like, wow, very cool, wow, innovative. Let's show it, let's do something. So people much more open also in the big museums in Japan. Mm-hmm.
Can you come here, please? Just our
mic
doesn't work.
This Japanese experience even brings us back to what you call life, the artificial life element, or the living system. Because I think in Japan, like with the Tamagotchis, it was so easy in Japan to have this little seeming like live creatures accepted. Whereas European or Occidental philosophy is very emphatic about what separates life from the artificial and what is the subject and the individuum. But in Asia, we have a different concept of the individuum. It's a weak subject, but in a positive sense. And to see the human body as a machine is less of a problem than in Europe, where with René Descartes, there was always the question that and things like that can never be imitated by a machine. So we have a long tradition in European or Occidental culture, which has big problems even with the term life, to call this life. But I'm fascinated that the openness of Japan for technology, I think, is part of that cultural background, which has not that opposition between the human organism and the machine, or even the algorithm. Funny enough now, even in the Occidental cultures, we regard more and more both our biological being as a code, and but this might be an explanation why there was more openness in Japan immediately for this approach.
And talking about Tamagotchi, it's funny because, we showed this evolve in, I think we continued to develop it in Japan in 95. And we were at the research laboratory, ATR research laboratory in Kyoto. So we were at a very lucky position. We were hired as artists to do our artistic research as like researchers, basically. And there was a very strong artificial life community with Shimohara-san, Tom Ray was there, Christopher Langton there. There was lots of conferences also about artificial life, and we were really very involved in this community. And at one point, we had also lots of people visiting from companies to see the installations and the research that we did. And at one point, this Tamagotchi came out. But there was already before a very long, and it was on the media, we have a lot of TV shows in Japan. So there was a lot of background already before this accumulated into the Tamagotchi. So there was a lot of openness also to this playful aspect of artificial life. And like you said, robotics also, like for example, robotics for elderly. It's not a big topic in Japan. People love to have robots for elderly. While here we always were like, oh my God, poor old people, now they have only these robots to take care of them. So there's a very different idea of the artificial.
Maybe just a word, because you didn't mention it, and I don't know whether it makes a difference for your long artwork with artificial life. Artificial intelligence, would that mean that Japan and China will be in advance with artificial intelligence because they don't have this European problem of always asking, is this what still differentiates human intelligence from machine intelligence, which is part of the European philosophical tradition. Whereas, as you say, there is a more natural openness to this. Would that mean in 20th century Asia will be in advance and we will be too slow because we are too philosophical about it?
Can I give my opinion about that? From my experience of all our exhibitions, since early age media are not only interactive, that's very interesting. I always said newest generation is then those one, not only you who are already maybe 30, but then some who were only 10, when they came to the exhibitions, not only interactive, also media, but especially in interactive, they completely different perceived And then it's not only playfulness, it's not only joy of, but this is generations which are coming, which will be also maybe in our world, not only in Asia. In Asia, maybe financially, they will support more, maybe governments or so. But people, this youngest generation, are much better prepared. What is very interesting about media art, that actually media art became like in 19th century photography. It was not perceived as art, as you said. For many museums, for many galleries, it's not only that they couldn't sell the media art, maybe Ivana would have something to say about that, but also because it's just was not perceived, and also universities didn't teach enough students because professors were not interested in art histories and so on. So it took a long time, and it's still this huge break between what is happening and what is teaching and what is this. And it's amazing how slowly it goes. Photography was in 50s still accepted as not as art, but it was like just handwork. Ivana, can you come here? Yeah. Okay. Okay, time. That's true. Well, thank you so much.